but I'm saying that we long to break down that fence between us, you see. We have our distinct traditions, and we have many differences, but we must not any longer, we the Jamaican people, and we who profess the Christian faith in Jamaica, must no longer allow the differences of the 16th century to ambush the message of the gospel to Jamaicans in the 21st century. We are planning a series of monthly forums such as this. We have plans for the next 3 already, and we hope that this will become a regular feature, an ecumenical feature of engagement, of discourse. So on behalf of Joseph Pereira, the chair of the St. Michael's Board, who is apologizing for his absence, on behalf of Deacon Peter Espute, the Dean of Studies, and the faculty here and students, we welcome you and encourage you to allow us to stay in touch with you and to make this a tradition of interchange, which we're kicking off with Noel's exegesis this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Deacon Thwaites. Reverend Thomas.
Brothers and sisters, all good evening. It is indeed a joy for me to be able to come the long way around to you. I think Reverend Thwaites is contemplating a more shorter route, whereas I have taken about 10 minutes to come across. If he should have his way, I will be here in 2 minutes because there will not be a fence between us. Try to greet him, our friend and colleague, Peter Espute, and of course, Your Grace, Archbishop Richards. I come this afternoon with a certain spirit, given the occasion for which we have gathered. I was one of those who was misinformed about the Maccabees Bible, thinking that it was something to be afraid of and dread. I'm not too sure where the idea comes from that we must be afraid of books and afraid of ideas. But I have since been happily informed about the Maccabees Bible, that it is maybe not so much a book but a movement. As you would be aware, it is the reaction against Hellenization, the conversion of Jews to the Greek way of life. And so you'll be hearing a lot about that this afternoon, but in essence, indeed it was a resistance to an imperial way of life. And with that, I'm sure that that is akin to our sociocultural history in the Caribbean, given the way in which our history began in resistance. We're still living in resistance, and in the spirit of one long-established adjunct professor at UTC Dublin, Reverend Dr. Burchell Taylor. That is the spirit I come with, because as he would say, we say no to Babylon. And so I have come in that spirit of resistance, and certainly in that resistance against the fence, but resistance against empire. Happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Thomas. And Dr. Thomas is known for his work in the area of resistance hermeneutics. One of the, I think, Oral, you made the list of the top 20 Caribbean theologians that people should know, or something like that. Did you know? There's a list that's out there of top 20 Caribbean theologians that people should know. I think you made it. All right, so we're going to turn over to the man of the hour, Mr. Noel Wilkins, and it's my pleasure to very briefly introduce you to Noel Wilkins. Many of you would know that Noel and I have been friends for many years. And on this instance, he's actually my graduate student, and I'm very proud of him, and he's going to be here sharing with you some of the work that we've done together. Another reason to know Noel, and his boss is here. He's a teacher of religious studies at Campion College, and the school is very well represented by Mrs. Grace Boston, who I know has offered lots of encouragement to Noel as he attempted to finish the thesis. So welcome again in a special way to Mrs. Baston. I want to also recognize the Archbishop Carter Foundation, which has a postgraduate scholarship, and Noel was the 2020 recipient, 2019 recipient of that scholarship, and it helped him to complete his studies. So, Noel, over to you.
Thank you very much. So back in the day, when you're doing a presentation, you only had to be concerned about speaking to the audience. Now we have to be focusing on who is on Zoom and who is trained and all of that. So, Deacon, we've just nearly maxed out on 100 people on Zoom joining us to the little 30 that are here present. So let's start the presentation in two directions. What is the Maccabees Bible? And can I ask, who here has read the Maccabees Bible? Could you raise your hand? And this is something that somebody is going to be tentative to say, what is the Maccabees Bible? And could you raise your hand if you've read the Maccabees Bible? So Deacon Espute, clearly, Archbishop Marvio, yes, you, and Marvio. No, just any of it. Right. So if you're Catholic invariably, now the initial inclination when I started my master's degree was that when teaching in later training program here at St. Michael's, I would be doing the New Testament Christian scriptures. And invariably the conversation would come up and I'd raise the point about what is a canon and the fact that our Catholic canon has 73 books. And majority of our Catholic students would go, what? And I said, yes, our Catholic Bible has 73 books, and the King James Version has 66. And they go like, what? So it's out of that initial wanting to do now something that would be on the canon, to explain the canon, and sort of explain why this was so. My supervisor said, no. Everybody writes about that. You can go online and find that. You're not going to do that. Round one to supervisor. So I got the idea I'm going to do something to the Maccabees. And by the way, I'm, of course, a product of both UTC and St. Michael's. So I started my first degree in St. Michael's and did the master's at UTC. And Dr. Taylor, Burchell Taylor, had a seminar, and I was speaking to him one day afterwards, and I'm saying, I'm struggling to find a title for my book, my master's. And in his own way, he says, why not the Maccabees? And there was my title. Now to figure out what to put in it. So, and anytime you hear me or anybody who says, a stroke of brilliance came to me, was that Gleaner Online made available, you could now access articles from 1834 and do a word search all the way through to the present. Stroke of genius. I'll just punch in Maccabees and see what articles come up. Genius? Yeah. And then I'll write an article around the 40 articles that I found. That's not a master's paper. You can't thread articles together. Round two, supervisor. So the song, Bring Back the Maccabee Version, a very popular hit song in the 1970s to mid-1971 by Max Romeo. It expressed resistance to the status quo regarding the use of the King James Version while calling for the black man's Bible. So, the black man had his Bible. They took the black man's Bible and gave us the King James Version. Keep that in your mind. There are a couple of things you're going to need to keep in your mind. So, clearly I said, this is something good, I can do Maccabees, and we started to explore. Regrettably, I wanted to have resistance against this topic because I saw clearly ahead of me I was going to have to engage Rastafarianism in some way, shape, or form. But we went on. So this call to action reflected on the experiences of the enslaved ancestors at the hands of the colonial masters, as well as the use of the Bible as a tool of oppression. But what exactly is the Maccabees Bible? Spelled Maccabees, I'll come to that in a second, or the Maccabee version that the Rastafarians were calling for, and in what way was it associated with the books of the Maccabees? So this Maccabee version in the song, how is it connected to the book of the Maccabees? Now, you're going to hear us Catholics in Deacon Espute's voice. They don't know that they're calling for the Catholic Bible, and they're calling for the Maccabee version, and they don't realize it's a Catholic version. So I'm indebted to Deacon Espute because his article started me as a first article that would now present the views of what the Maccabee Bible is. And take my word for it, your opinions are going to be, or say the other one, I'll leave you to conclude what is the Maccabee Bible in a few minutes, up to 20 minutes. So far, the Rasta says it existed during slavery. However, as Dr. Thomas expressed, this is a book to be feared, right, Dr. Thomas? So deep within our culture, I have experienced anecdotal stories of people expecting us fear of the Maccabees Bible. Not just we shouldn't read it, but to the point of being fearful of it. It could drive you crazy. Anecdotal story. I have been lucky that a number of my Gleaner articles have actually expressed some of the anecdotal stories I have heard, so I can present them as material or data supporting each of these anecdotal stories. You'll soon see where I'm going with this. Was it a mythical Bible passed on through folklore in song and anecdotal stories, or an actual Bible that existed during slavery and was later banned in the 70s? Was the Maccabee Bible banned in the 70s? Anybody knows? On this side we hear? Definitely not. Anybody say yes? Clearly no Rastas in here. Thought we invited some Rastafarians. Please, we'll check on that. So was it a mythical Bible? Was it simply a compilation of 4 books of Maccabees with Psalm 151? Was it? Where would I get that from? That's according to PhD Roderick McLean, and we'll soon meet him. Or was it a complete Bible edition comprising Hebrew Christian scriptures, as Deacon Espute, and we're going to be introduced to Reverend Tiedemann, and several others books which are referred to as the mystical hidden books of the Bible? Anybody ever heard about the hidden books of the Bible? Yeah, go online, you write hidden books of the Bible. You want to see the Maccabees in there? No, you won't. So foresight, I'll get back to him. So even a text associated with the occult. Anybody ever heard anything to do with that? Well, Professor Shavans on more than one time cites and quotes the Maccabees in the same context with one particular name that sends shivers up your spine. Anybody know what that name would be? De Lawrence. Why would Professor Shavans be citing the Maccabees in the same context and sentence with the De Lawrence books? My principal, I've noted quite often, loves to say, Catholic science. What exactly is Catholic science, and does it exist? So I'd like to now introduce you to some of the articles, and I'd like to start with somebody who we find very familiar. I hope we all know this gentleman by face, and Just touch, hide. Hide, here, hide floating. Right. So Mark Wignall writes in an article, Tough Times and Depression. So his article was really speaking about Jamaican attitude to mental illness. So far, so good? What does this have to do with Maccabees? Any guesses? Occult? Studying science? So I'm like little Smokey, this is a fellow, about 3 times per week. He's fully adorned in frame wire on his head and an extension that runs down to a crown on his head. And it has plastic balls, and he's barefooted. Next slide. I would then ask, what brought Smokey to this situation? Clearly suffering from mental illness. And a young man chimed in, him read too much Maccabees Bible, and it mad him. So that's one of the anecdotal stories that is in the Jamaican culture. People in rural parts, I think, have more repeated it than us in the city. But the Maccabees is clearly associated. So that's the first of the 3 that I discuss in my paper. So the first is, what connection is there between Maccabees? Now, I do make a point, which is a distant point, that in chapter 3, there has been studies done, and maybe I'll do that later on, I'll come back to it. But there's studies that was done in Ghana where they have what I would consider a parallel experience, where there are people who have been known to have been reading the books on the occult, and they have exhibited schizophrenia. We call people who are mad, what condition some of them are having? Schizophrenia. So that's further studies which I'll pick up on later on. So that's my first point. What does Maccabees have to do with the occult? Now, if Deacon Espute is right, if Archbishop is right, there's absolutely nothing in the book of Maccabees that could connect us with the occult. Or is there? The other 2 points, welcome everybody. I'd like to show you Max Romeo in his later days. I got a wonderful article, and it's a gem because my paper is revolving about Max, his comments in this article. So I've created my whole paper central around Max Romeo's comments. And listen to what Max Romeo says. I had the Maccabees version in my head about a year playing around with. A lot of producers did not want to touch it because the Maccabee Bible was banned. But these erstwhile gentlemen say, no, it was never banned. So what could Max Romeo be talking about in print? This is an interview. Everybody with me so far? There we go. His second comment is puzzling. They feared I would face reprisal. Romeo also stated that there were other banned books, and these books were ringing in my head. What does he mean by that? I make a speculation as to what it means, and I make a speculation as to which books he's referring to. And notice he says, the other books that were banned, implying to me that the Maccabees is banned as well as the Lawrence books. I have one student who is ready to graduate already. Thank you, Deacon. So my method, it's Control H, Alt H. It's to take off the bar off the screen. So the method of study is narrative analysis. It explores the many anecdotal stories. As I said, I use a research word on Maccabees in the Gleaner. I came up with 40 articles, and the 40 articles were across the range. Some were archaeological. One was about the orchestra doing the Judas Maccabea symphony. in the Jewish synagogue, a range of articles. But can you imagine? You all have been missing so many articles on the Maccabees in the Gleaner. But it's over 100 years or so, so it's a long time. Anybody recognize anybody in this picture? I thought you'd tell me Barry Evans. The podium? Oh, okay. My bad. No, he isn't in this one. Sir Jankee. And I put it under the research method picture. Everybody? Get the connection? Research method? Okay, all right. You didn't get it. Professor Shevans next, please, I think. So additionally, research was done and scholarly work looking at if you Catholics want to claim the Maccabees Bible, the Maccabees is a Bible because it contains what books? Hello, what books? The books of the Maccabees. Are Catholic Bibles the only one that contain the books of the Maccabees? No. As a matter of fact, apart from the Roman Catholic Bible, gem number one, what you're going to learn, some of us know, but others are going to learn a little more, that the original King James Version, translated in 1611, also contained 2 books of the Maccabees. So far, so good? So the original King James contained the 7 books that they refer to as the Apocrypha. So, oops, we're not the only one with Maccabees. And it's the same Maccabees they had. They just called it the Apocrypha. That's bad language in Catholic. As a matter of fact, our Orthodox brethren also have books of Maccabees in their Bible, and hence they too could possibly be considered the Maccabee Bible if the basis is a Bible that contains the books of the Maccabees. Now, I will not explore the Russian and the Syrian Orthodox churches because the likelihood of those Bibles being available during slavery was very remote. And there's historical background to that. But however, I had to slip into the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Why? It too has the book of Maccabees. And Deacon Espute actually pointed me in that direction. Next. So I disobeyed a few rules. So one of the things we learned very early at Campion was we were teaching online. They started to put us this mode of dual. You have online students. After you start paying attention to the ones here, you forget the ones online. So there's 100 people there that are following on the camera. And I also disobeyed the rules about crowding your slides. I'm sorry, too many words. So let's start with something that I noticed and tell me if I'm being pedantic here. The presentation is? Okay. Just go over there. Yep. And then share. So, as we're going along, I observed something which I wonder if you take note of, and would it mean anything to you? That Professor Shevans and the people he interviewed, so remember now, Professor Shevans is Catholic, he wrote Catholic songs, and my supervisor again slapped me and said, don't say anything about Professor Shevans. He makes comments, interviews his Rastafarians in his books, and he reports the spelling of the Maccabees with one C, M-A-C-A-B-E-E. So it can be Maccabee or Maccabees. Foresight, most of you may recognize that picture. It's a very popular picture. That's the original version of Foresight's book. This is the updated book belonging to my supervisor. Foresight also uses a M-A-C-A-B-E-E. Similarly, Max Romeo's song, the title is actually spelled M-A-C-A-B-E-E, or Maccabee version. Maybe I'm being pedantic. Next slide. I do, however, notice that those articles that I have from the learned religious gentlemen, all without exception, spelt it M-A, 2 C's. So, Reverend Dispute spelled it just like how it is. Paul Tiedemann, who will meet in a few minutes, also spelled it with 2 C's. Reverend Earl Thames, he also. Roderick McLean, and I may introduce him now. My research took a deep bend when I discovered this book. The book is entitled The Original Maccabees Bible. What's happening to my research here? First, I start out with 2 books in a Catholic Bible, and I now find that a PhD, and we're going to see him in a few minutes, has compiled 4 books. First Maccabees, second, third, and fourth, and Psalm 151 in a compilation. However, in his preface, in his notes, he makes no comments at all in regard to why he called this book the original Maccabee Bible, makes no assertions that anybody else makes in all of the other research. He only puts it together. But it's, how many books of the Maccabees? 4. Now, I didn't go through the technical explanation of the difference between the 4, not necessary for this presentation. By the way, Deacon, if things go well and this goes well, I think we should ask that this be done next year and put it as a Reggae Month event, because we're focusing on the Maccabee. It really is. It's a Reggae Month. The key point about this presentation is the Maccabee Bible and the Maccabee version. So next year we can, I mentioned to Dr. Perkins on Sunday and thought, you know, we missed a good opportunity of having it as a Reggae Month. Reverend Kaplan, who is now, sorry, not Reverend, sorry, Jewish rabbi, strike me if you heard me say that, he enters the fray. And he too speaks about the Maccabee Bible. There's one thing that I observed, and you're going to observe as well. Even though these writers are authorities in their churches, many of them with PhDs, the positions that they are presenting are not necessarily consistent with their religious group's position. So they are not speaking. I have 10 minutes left, so I'm halfway through. Great. So Reverend Kaplan, who is Jewish, here is a Jewish Tanakh, does not contain the book of Maccabees at all. He insists there is a Maccabee Bible. So the research does develop into some very curious observations. Go back one slide for me, please. I wanted to point out 2 things. Just go back one, just for the information. So this is, and Reverend Thomas, remember when we celebrated the 400th anniversary of the King James Version? I can't tell them that I was over there from this time. So this is a copy of a replica of the King James with the Apocrypha and the Maccabees, which was made available as a 400-year anniversary copy. So people could, and you can still go online and purchase King James versions with the Apocrypha in them. Right. That's a sample of our Catholic Bible. Going back, it's a sample coming from the Douay Rhymes, one of the earlier editions. Now we're in trouble again. And of course, so let's go on. And I'm at the 10, which is good. Anybody knows the significance of Psalm 151? Just to make sure it didn't go over anybody's head. How many Psalms are there in the Bible? How many Psalms in the Bible? So what's the significance of a Psalm 151? It's not in the Bible. There are a lot of these things that I'm going to say in the question and answer, which you're going to go like, how did we not notice that? And you're going to see 2 more. Yeah, just go over and click. So let's get through quickly. So we're now going to be introduced to our first article. And next slide. And Reverend Earl Thames introduces his article, and his article is entitled Rastafarians' Challenge to Christianity, United Church, and he was given an apologetic, a Christian apologetic, refusing the teachings of Rastafarianism. That's his sole purpose in this article. I liked his article. I liked him because he demonstrated a knowledge of the books of the Maccabees. And when I say knowledge, the content, and he also said the Maccabees have historical value. However, these books were included in the Catholic Bible, his quote, in other Bibles explicitly marked with the Apocrypha, and that's a sample of one of these modern-day books, a New Revised Standard Version with the Apocrypha in it. So you have modern-day non-Catholic Bibles that now contain the Apocrypha, and at least one of them contains Psalm 151. They were readily available in almost any bookstore in the 1970s, so the Maccabees were not banned in Jamaica in the 70s. Right, Deacon Dispute? Right, Deacon Thwaites? Definitely not banned. Now, here is somebody who rejects, who is also saying that. Let's move on. His next comment. Right. So books of the Maccabees were excluded from the King James and others because they're not deemed inspired literature. And I was told never to be dependent on your slide, but it was to make sure I don't overtalk. And he had two conclusions. No such Bible as the Maccabee Bible. His conclusion is, the books are not scriptural, they don't belong in the Bible, so there's nothing called the Maccabees Bible. Reasonable conclusion. And the second one, the Maccabees had nothing to do with Rastafarian beliefs. Is he correct? The Maccabees have a lot to do with Rastafarianism. Maybe you know Dr. Pinnock. Next one, we have the starting article. Go ahead, just go ahead. It shouldn't stop you. And if you do, just sign off of Zoom from me. So we get Deacon Espute's, share screen. Deacon Espute's article. And Deacon Espute, as we know, would make the simple and obvious conclusion. The Maccabees exist, and the Maccabees Bible is the Catholic Bible. Very simple and straightforward. This Bible arrived early in Jamaican history from the 1500s when the Spanish arrived here, correct? Everybody knows that? And has been banned many times throughout the history of Jamaica. So it was banned from 1655 when what occurred? English took over and they threw out the Spanish, and hence Catholic religion and the Bibles were thrown out. What we don't know that there was a brief period in 1688 where when King James II was, he lasted only 3 years. He was actually a Catholic king. He actually reinstated in Jamaica a Catholic who was to be governor. Unfortunately, he only lasted 3 years. They threw him out. I mean the king, not the governor. And then the governor died. So it was again legal for 3 years, and then again was banned. But then in 1790-something, in England, they allowed Catholicism to return. Catholics started to return in Jamaica and set up shop again, and then became legal again. But since 1790 onwards, the Catholic Bible has never been banned again. So it was legal during the 1700s in Jamaica, but illegal before that. So anybody's comment about the Maccabees Bible being seditious during the time of slavery, hold that thought in the top of your head. Also, it wasn't banned in the 70s, which we all agree. Here is Deacon's actual words. Rastas prefer the Maccabee version, that's us, Catholic Bible, to the King James version, even though over the decades they've had to be using the King James because them don't have no Catholic Bible, or them put fire upon Rome, as Protege says. Yeah. Haile Selassie himself was a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in ways similar to the Church of Rome, except for the acceptance of the authority of the Pope. Deaconess Bute just gave me another thought. What other Bible contains the Maccabees? And if the Rastas preferred a Bible, which one would they prefer? That makes sense to me. So, Deaconess Bute, thank you. You led me in the next direction to start looking at the Ethiopian Orthodox. So, next comes in Paul Tiedemann. He's from the Reformed Lutheran Church. And he has a fantastic article that excited me because his argument was reggae reveals church involvement in slavery. You want to take a guess which song is his starting point? Maccabee version. So here he now comes and listen to his argument in his article. So he quotes Maccabee version, the song, and then he says, fully well, so he has a PhD, he believes the Maccabee Bible is actually the first edition of the King James Bible, which did contain the Maccabees, and contained the Maccabees for 200 years. Not until 1827 were the books of Maccabees officially removed from the King James, while both editions, one without the Maccabees was available, and one with the Maccabees, meaning the Apocrypha, both were available during this period. His argument went on further to say, there are 4 books of the Maccabees. Oops. This book arrived with the Church of England in the 1600s. The slave masters influenced the removal of the books of the Maccabees in 1827, when the Bible Society officially, after the Apocrypha controversy, refused to print any more Bibles with the Maccabees in it, or the books of the Apocrypha. Anytime you hear him say Maccabees, it means the whole books of the Apocrypha. So it's not until 1827 that these non-Catholic Bibles ceased to be carrying the Apocrypha in them. 1827. When is this in relation to slavery? 1827, what happens a few short years after? Yeah. So he's claiming, that's fine, he's claiming that they tried to take out the Maccabees to prevent the slaves from learning about the revolt. So he demonstrates a knowledge of the content of the book of Maccabees. Tiedemann further posited that they were unsuccessful as the enslaved of the West Indies came to identify as deeply with Judas Maccabeus of the books of Maccabees as they did with Moses of the Exodus. So he claims, no, not a Catholic Bible. 3 more slides. 3 more slides. Let's go. This is, if anybody doubts it, that's a copy of the preface of the original, I call it the original King James, and clearly you'll see listed all of the books of the Apocrypha in the 1611 version if you had doubts about it. That's a copy of the 1611 book. Next one. Oh, by the way, sorry. Yeah. How many books this guy has? How many Tiedemann said a while ago? 4 books of Maccabees and Psalm 151 were later added to a revision of the Bible, but not until 1975. Next. Next, you're going around. Yeah, there we go. So Rabbi Kaplan, Jewish, served in Jamaica. He writes an article. The Maccabees Bible existed during slavery. It was seditious for the enslaved to have this book. Kaplan and Tiedemann both made the connection with the books, the Maccabees song. So both of them quote the Maccabees song. Both of them say the Maccabees Bible exists. He made no indication of the number of books of Maccabees. Tiedemann said it was 4. The original King James Version was only translated with 2. Tiedemann made an error. Glaring error. So that puts in question a part of his theory. But his theory makes sense if you know the Maccabee song. The Maccabee song says, we got the black man's Bible first, the original King James with the Apocrypha. Then they took it from us and then gave us back what? The King James without the Apocrypha. So this makes sense if you know the history, but it doesn't make sense in the context of history. You'll see. Last one. So, as I said, the original the original Maccabee has some Rasta connection. He's Guyanese, but Miguel Lorne is the one who published it. Interesting, isn't it? But it makes no assertions about Rastafarianism. Definitely not. Definitely not. So the point that this is, you'll soon see the point, Deacon Escute, you'll soon see the point. The point that this makes is, it's not a complete Bible. It's singularly just somebody who pulled the 4 books of Maccabees together and put them in a compilation. But why would he call it the original Maccabees Bible? Who claims it's the original King James Version, claims it's 4 when it wasn't. The Catholic Bible, you will find, during slavery, was in Latin and not widely distributed in Jamaica. If you remember, they accused us of keeping away Bibles from the congregation. Everybody remember that accusation? So Bibles would have been singularly in the hands of the church and the priests, but not readily available. And in Latin. That would attribute a sense of mystique around the reading of the Catholic Bible and the Catholic Mass, which was also in Latin. So when the enslaved would have heard this, possibly there's some mystique around this whole Catholic Bible, which has been passed on through the culture, through the generations. Maybe. I observed something, and again, you put the weight to it that it's valued. In the books of Maccabees, there are 2 significant events that I think Rastafarians would associate it with. A, the Maccabees were forced to eat pork against their will. B, they were punished by the authorities. Their Bibles, their books were going to be damaged. Everybody with me so far? Next slide. No. Next slide. You're making it look like one. Hilton, Professor Dr. Hilton made these comments. Mike, these are his comments, that Rastafarians had gone through the experience of their locks being chopped off. They've gone through all of these things, being forced to eat meat. I have not, and you can't draw a conclusion from the absence of evidence because it could be there. None of any of the Rastafarian sources that I've encountered have ever mentioned any of these references. Not even Barry Evans. None of the Rastafarian sources I encountered made any of these references at all. And that's including up to Chart Down Babylon, which I had a look at. Almost there. So, none of the people on the Rastafarian side who speak about the Maccabees Bible mention any content, any quotation, any reference at all to an event in the book of the Maccabees on the Rastafarian side. The ones who made the claim about the Maccabees Bible being a Bible all use the double C. The ones who speak about Maccabees and make no references all have the single C, without exception. And this is where the cliffhanger hits. Now, everybody who quotes the Maccabees are quoting whose song? Right. Now, but what exactly is the Maccabees, the view of the Maccabees by the Rastafarians? A, the Maccabees was originally written in Amharic, which is a language of Ethiopia. B, it was corrupted by the King James and Catholic Bible, so that Bibles used to evangelize and save would support the philosophy of the European slave masters. See? Had valuable books from the ancient original Bible that the Roman Catholic Church and the King James sponsored removed. That's according to Forsyth. And this was an effort to keep the mystical wisdom writings away from the majority of black people. That's according to Chevans. Last comment and then I'm finished. I have not found, and I keep going back to this. I have not yet found one source that gives you all of the references to the Maccabees in any Rastafarian literature. You have to pick all of these together to come up with this. No one document presents. So Joe starts it off very early. I saw you have a copy of Dread. So he starts it off with 2 of his references. That's this. So he has 2 references. And all the other references you have to pick and pull together. Last one, and we're done now. No, go on. Go on. I'll leave you with this. The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible is unique. It has 81 books in its canon, even more than the Catholic Bible. Originally written in Amharic and translated into Ge'ez. And the specific Ethiopian Orthodox Tweedo Church Bible contains 46, 35, and books that none of the other Bibles have translated. If you put the pieces together, every one of the things that are quoted by the Rastafarians a while ago, this Bible meets the criteria. And we're done. But here's a challenge with it. This Bible was never available in the Caribbean, as far as we know, not during slavery. And it was never translated into English until Emperor Haile Selassie came in and got a 1930 edition, and then they had trouble even translated to English into 1956. My proposition is the Maccabees, in the Rastafarian mind, is the Ethiopian Orthodox, but it's a reading back into history about what they now know and claiming about slavery, which has nothing to do with the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilkins. We are way over time for half an hour presentation, and you recognize, of course, that there is a lot more there than he could have given you in the time. So we'll allow the question and answer to break open some more of that, the methodology and so on. I do, however, have to turn over to our panel, and I'm going to beg the gentleman's indulgence, given that we're really over time in terms of what we expected. I had said 10. Would you indulge me with 8? 8? All right, hold on. They're saying 10. Does that mean then that you guys are willing to stay beyond 6:30? Can we go like another 15 minutes, 20 minutes? All right, it's looking like people are not going to leave. To my colleagues who are online, I hope you can bear with us. There is a richness there, and let's try and find a way to parse it out. So let's begin. I'm going to ask Reverend Taylor to start first. Burchell, are you okay going first? Yeah, man, come. And I'm not going to spend too much time with introductions because our panel is actually very well known.
I need to say thanks for the invitation to be sharing in this, and also at the same time to indicate that I have no great learning in this area, but I had my encounter with the presenter, and he insisted that I should be part of this. I want to say that listening to him and having read the manuscript, I would like to say that the thing that kept turning over in my mind is what I call the politics of the Bible. And by the politics of the Bible, I mean the politics of the use of the Bible. And I believe that this is related to what I call in the first place oral tradition. And that there was a long stretch of oral tradition about the Bible, about the use of the Bible. And in that time, the Bible became an instrument, a means, and sometimes even a weapon. And it was used to manipulate. It was used to condition. It was used to persuade on the assumption of what was in the Bible, but nobody was reading what was in the Bible. It was just mere oral tradition as to what was in the Bible. In my view, where there is oral tradition, there is also conflation. And therefore, as the oral tradition develops and more information gets into the place, then we are getting different versions of the story. The fact, the real fact, take it like the fact that the Ethiopian Bible was not here as a printed version. I don't know how information traveled from Africa to this country. And that could have happened in many and different ways, by oral tradition and by passing on certain things. And because the Bible or the Bibles and the use of the Bible were for a long time part of oral tradition, we got various versions of what existed in the Bible. Secondly, I think that what we are learning today is that one of the great things that existed in the lives of the oppressed people was what is called hidden transcript. And there was the hidden script where these people communicated amongst themselves what they believed, and never ever became part of the public transcript. Only later, when people were becoming more literate, in my mind, that the hidden transcript, because there were various different stories about what was in the Bible, and what was in what Bible, people developed certain theories. When I was growing up, and that's a long time ago, but when I was growing up, I heard very early in my life, and my people were Christian. You know, I grew up in a Protestant Christian family. I heard in a long time that there were books that were not included in the Bible. And these books were really being hidden from us. What did not come up but was in the thesis is that when they talked about these books, they also included in them 6 and 7 books of Moses and the Lawrence. So when they talked about hidden books and books were not there, they were not just what Protestants refer to as intertestamental books or apocryphal books, but they, in my mind, when I was hearing it, it also included 6 and 7 books of, because they did not make that kind of distinction. But my argument is to talk about the Maccabees Bible is really inaccurate. It is to talk about a collection of writings that includes the books of the Maccabees. And it seems to me that the books that would have been of great interest are 1st and 2nd Maccabees in particular, which would be really dealing with the Antiochus Epiphanes and what he did in middle 2nd century. Really heard that they forced, they set up an altar in the temple, sacrifice pigs on it, forced the people to do this. So my own belief is that when people talk about the Maccabees, this is just my belief, they are talking about the collection of writings that includes the Maccabees. And at some level, people also think that this must be identified with the 6th and 7th books of Moses. As I close, I would say that I do believe that increasingly people are coming to see, and Protestant Christians are coming to recognize the value of these books that they do not regard as belonging to the Protestant canon from 1827, because indeed the original King James Version did have in these books, and it then, again, it's politics in my mind. It's the politics of the use of the Bible. I close by saying this. I believe one of the trouble, and as church, and we are in the age in which we are, we need to bear in mind right now that we do not only teach people the Bible, but we need to teach people about the Bible. I think that is vastly important, because we teach the Bible, but we don't teach people how the Bible came together. We don't teach people how the canon was shaped and formed. And people, at least in certain sections of the church, people believe the Bible dropped out of heaven. People believe that the people sat down and the Bible was dictated to them directly, word for word. And watch it. I won't be around, but I believe in the next so many years, the mystique that is about the Maccabees Bible, which I believe are books that are, the mystique is going to be around, at least in Protestant Christianity, the mystique is going to be with the King James Version. Right now in the church to which I belong, people are saying they're not reading any other version about the King James Version. And it is only that version that is the inspired word. So when you read Jerusalem Bible, New International Version, Revised Standard Version, you are not reading the Bible. And I believe in that same tradition, we now mystify certain versions based upon the politics of the use of the Bible. And I am appealing that in the church, we do not only teach the Bible, but teach about the Bible, that people may better appreciate what is in the Bible and how the disclosure of God was transmitted through the fragility of human beings. Thank you very much.
So there is two things. So while I was researching, I did venture a little off and got slapped by my supervisor again. I actually started to study the African countries that came to the Caribbean when they were Christianized, and how effective was the level of Christianization going back to the time of, to try and trace to see if some of the drift from Eastern Africa with the Ethiopians came over to Western, just to see if that drift came to the Caribbean, but I was slapped and told, get back on track again. So that's maybe later on.
As the only non-theologian on the panel, I'm sandwiched between two eminent theologians. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Noel on his thesis, which I've had the chance to read. Which bravely explores one of the continuous controversies around Maccabees and its relationship to the Bible. And he has done excellent research. I don't know if I necessarily agree with all his conclusions, but he does raise some very interesting points. And, well, my first, I'm not going to do an agree-disagree. I'm just going to comment on some of the things that he has mentioned that are contained in the thesis as well as in his presentation. And to first agree that the Maccabees are no myth. They exist. Whether they are part of the original Bible or not is, as previous speaker said, a matter of politics. And the church is notorious for its politics. I don't hear any voice of disagreement there. It's understandable, given the context in which Rastafari developed, that they would latch on at some stage, and not in the early stages of the evolution of Rastafari, but a little later on, that they would hold on to Maccabees as something that was relevant to them. And this is particularly because of what the books of the Maccabees spoke about, which was really resistance and rebellion. So in that context, it's easy to understand why it would have a particular resonance with the Rastafari communities. Because I also want to make the point that there is no one unified Rasta theology. Right? But that particular thing is held more or less in common across the different mansions of Rastafari. The alignment of Maccabees to the Lords is not something that I'm particularly familiar with. But again, I'm not surprised because of the way in which the discussion around the books of the Maccabees arose. They were not banned, as were the Lords books, which still are banned, actually. And in my early days at the Jamaica Bible Bank, there was a researcher who was doing work on the Lawrence, and at the time, the then Minister of Culture, who also happened to be, at the time, the Prime Minister, actually wrote to the Commissioner of Police asking for an exception to be made so that this researcher could have access to the Lawrence books. I saw the letter that was written. I have yet to see a reply from the commissioner. But, you know, the Maccabees became conflated in this whole mystique of the Lawrence, and mistakenly so. There's a strong link between the Maccabees and Judaism because the Maccabee family were Jews. And the book speaks to their rebellion against the authorities at the time. It is also interesting, and I can't recall if Noel actually mentions this or examines this. He couldn't examine everything, much as I know he would like to. And I've known Noel for many, many years. And I'm very well aware of his persistence. It is interesting that on two counts that the Rastas are critical of the Pope, yet the Roman Catholic Church and the Bible that is, well, sometimes, but not universally used in the Roman Catholic Church, contains the books of the Maccabees. And also that they lay claim, some anyway, to being the original Jews. And as I said, I can't recall if you examine that to an extent. Which points to, you know, certain contradictions which exist in any theological construct. Historically, the availability, not only the availability of the Bible, whether it contained the Apocrypha or not, it would not have been, A, widely available, and in reference to what Dr. Taylor just mentioned, not many people, even if they had physical access to it, could read it. So there was limited access. And certainly in the Roman Catholic Church, but also in at least one Anglican church that I'm aware of. In the Anglican Church, you have what is called high church and low church. And my grandparents were, and my mother were members initially of the Kingston Parish Church. And certainly in the early 20th century, high mass was conducted in Latin, right at the bottom of King Street. So that made access to the rituals and liturgy of the church even less so. And that has only changed in recent years. The point of Maccabees resistance, the evolution of Rasta is resistance, not exclusive to them, but they have been one of the most strident set of voices speaking to anti-colonialism and freedom from colonialism in the modern world. And I leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.
Bernard, thank you very much. Thank you. Deacon Thwaites.
When you are the number 11 batsman, and there's going to be an appeal for light very soon, the best you can do is to lick out. I'd like to inject a little humor, if I can elicit. When Honorable Dr. Burchell spoke about teaching people about the Bible, how it came to be, I remember an instance when the late Monsignor Mokian he picked up a very strong evangelical person of deep faith, and they were on a long drive discussing biblical matters, dogmatic matters. And when the argument came to a close, the gentleman said to him, well, I don't see so-and-so that you are putting forward in the King James Version. And if the King James Version was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. Let me ask you the question, though. Why do you think, why is this yearning that Noel Wilkins picks up in his very, I want to say, exhaustive, almost rinsing of limited sources about the issue of the Maccabees Bible? His sources are exquisitely parsed and taken apart, I think we'll all agree, but they're frail. They're matters of oral tradition, for the most part. Some of the commentators he would acknowledge, I'm sure, who he mentions, really have no depth of research in Jamaican culture. And one has to draw out and thread the connecting and sometimes conflicting issues as he does so well. Why the yearning? What is it among our people that seeks for some explanation within the Bible of their predicament? Noel Wilkins is to be congratulated for continuing the tradition of theological research relevant to Jamaican life. He seeks to clear up a very significant textual issue. If sola scriptura, scripture alone, is the basis for faith, then it's important for us to agree what is authentically scriptura. You agree? Yes. And the rereading of the book of Maccabees and relating that to Rasta struggles makes it easy to understand the currency of this argument in popular circles. The story of the mother and the 7 sons reminds me of what happened at Coral Gardens. Yes? It wasn't pork, but it was an abuse and an outrage of Rastafari and of human dignity. The echoes of the Christmas rebellion are to be found in 2 Maccabees chapter 8. And in the account of Judas and Nicanor, we see the ultimate and proportionate victory of the righteous cause. So it is not surprising to me that there is this resonance, particularly if it has the aura of suspicion that it has been kept in secret deliberately so. The attraction of the Maccabees picks up on what may be incoherent among the majority of Jamaican people, but is the real substratum of Jamaican consciousness. That is, a conviction that within the scriptures lies the key to resistance against oppression. That trust in the word of God and a yearning suspicion, often garbled and without evidentiary foundation, that the religion of the white man was missing something, that it was a text deliberately withheld, the same text that must be there, sometimes a clutching at straws, meticulously examined by Wilkins, revealing, however, a deeper search for a faith source which speaks to their need for liberation and remembers and chronicles the reality of servitude. The colonial church union could never have countenanced Maccabees. No wonder King James had to be revised. And who else? Pastor Nib of great fame was the one who was quoting the Bible to Sam Sharp on the eve of the Christmas rebellion and telling them that it was the word of God, that they should go home and not confront the murderous people who wanted to subdue them. Sadly, it was Father Woolett, was it not, who was congratulating Governor Eyre after the 1865 rebellion on the basis that order and justice and God's peace had been recovered by what Eyre had done. Where else is in the record of even contemporary, where else is the record of even temporary religious and political independence of the chosen people, if not in the exciting, riveting stories in the Maccabees? Exceptionalism by that group of persons and by the Anawim of the society generally is a response to the disrespect and oppression which is their daily lot. The sources, as I say, appear to me to be thin, but they nonetheless have underlying a deep need for an explanation of how the Word of God explains, and a deep sense of hurt that it appears not to explain and offer a solution to their oppression. We have many questions to ask out of Wilkins' study and these reflections. Can we, as a Jamaican society, confront the question, how has King James and other versions of the Bible been used to enslave people? Was the book banning of the 1960s, even if it didn't include the Maccabees, how has it fanned the suspicion of Bible censorship? Both Dr. Taylor and myself at various events in the 1960s had books banned and taken away from us. When we brought it. I had a book called Black is Beautiful by Angela Davis, and that was taken away from me by one superintendent, Barry used to guard the Prime Minister, Barry Ford. Yes, never returned, and there were many others. And that indicates a frame of mind that I think underlies much of the concerns that people raise. What happened in 1827? What was the political basis in 1827, which caused 1st and 2nd Maccabees to be expunged from the King James Version? Where do we find this prodigious search for an analysis of texts deeper than the rasters themselves, which Wilkins now offers us? Appropriated, sanitized, and diluted, the Bible is often used as a defense of the kind of crony capitalism which still keeps down the Jamaican people. There must be a writ against oppression, the Dread are telling us. The stretch, the search for the Maccabees, and the struggle and victory, it is alleged desperately, it is hoped to contain. This is a valid cry from the base, from the Dread. It is a hope for agency, for deliverance, to be able to achieve something of material and yet cosmic performance. Not dissimilar to what we in the Catholic Church draw from the Maccabees, the efficacy of prayers for the dead, of purgatory, and most comforting of all to me, the communion of saints. So what I'm asking us to do is to appreciate what Wilkins has done, but to look behind it at the politics, at the deep spiritual longing which is at work among those who yearn for the Maccabees Bible. I thank you.
Deacon, thank you very much. Reverend Taylor, Mr. Jankee, gentlemen, thank you very much. You worked to pull out and to get behind what Noel was attempting to do. And the beauty of it was that they actually read the manuscript and so had the breadth of what was actually inside the manuscript, as opposed to what you managed to present very quickly, but in some way long-windedly to everyone that is present here. But good job, Mr. Wilkins. I would like us to spend some time taking questions, and then we probably could look at one or two of the comments online. I know our beloved Deacon Espute has been chomping at the bit. I'm almost afraid to give him the microphone. Peter, come 1 minute or less in the challenge that you're going to present to our key presenter, or you can also engage with our panelists as well.
I want to thank Noel for letting me have a look at the thesis a couple of weeks ago. And so I also have read the document. I would have liked him to evaluate the sources. Was it really true that the Maccabee version was around in slavery? If so, only books it could have been would have been the Douay-Rheims version. There was a English version, by the way, Noel. Right, it was before the King James Version. A lot of people don't realize that. The Douay-Rheims, the Catholic English was before. But, so that would have had the Maccabees in it. And indeed, looking at the historical record, the first Jesuits in Jamaica, Duperon and Cottam, wrote back to England asking them to send carton boxes of Bibles. So there would have been English Bibles available, but they came, of course, in 1837. So 100 years later is when the Rastas started. When did the Rastas become aware of the Maccabee version, so-called? And what could it have been in the 1830s, 40s? Again, the recent thing that Michael Lorne published couldn't be it. Rabbi hadn't even come yet. How did he know that it was in slavery? I mean, I've read a bit about him. I don't know if I consider him a credible witness at all. So that leaves us with the Catholic Bible and the King James. The thing that I was also looking forward to seeing in your thesis, which I didn't see, is there something like that called the Maccabees Bible overseas? I mean, to say if we had it in Jamaica, we didn't produce it. It would have to be produced in the US, England, or somewhere. And you didn't check that out, because there is no thing called the Maccabee Bible anywhere. If it was banned in Jamaica, there would have to be copies elsewhere. But there are no copies elsewhere. So it is, in fact, this Maccabee Bible is just a colloquial expression used to describe either the Catholic Bible or the King James Version. I don't believe the Ethiopian Orthodox came to Jamaica in the 1970s. When they came here, they studied here at St. Michael's. I was here when they came. That Ethiopian Theological Bible could not have been here before then. So I think that by process of elimination, we have to come down that the King James or the Catholic Bibles is what some people got a glimpse of and called the Maccabee version.
Deacon, thank you very much. I have a strong suspicion that Noel doesn't disagree. I think you leave it there for the moment and you can pick it up back at another point. Come on, Rev. And did I see a hand round back?
Thank you so very much. Noel, thank you so very much for your explorations. Really, really enticing. And thanks to the panelists who responded. I just want to pick up a little on where Deacon Thwaites left us, to ask the question, how far did you go? Because I'm particularly interested from the perspective of resistance, liberation theology. So how far did you go in making the connection to Rastafari's mystical roots? And perhaps their connection, and this I believe Mr. Jankee might be interested in as well, perhaps the connection to their roots in the Bedouinite community, where, so we wouldn't necessarily be seeing any separation between occult and their teachings, but that this would be the alternative sources of power, that are powers that they were tapping into to fuel the revolt or their resistance. Did you look at that? Because I don't have the privilege of seeing the thesis, so what are those connections that you would have made?
So I'll try and be as brief as I can, since I've used up all of the time that was allocated, and that's why I said I was not going to respond to, because I've already overused. So there are two sets of things that I want to raise a point about. I didn't do chapter 3 at all. This is all in chapter 2, which simply was asking the question, what is the Maccabee Bible? And the conclusion of chapter 2 is any one of these are just people's views, and there isn't something called the Maccabees Bible, as Deacon Espute pointed out. It is a mythical name for a document. Chapter 3 goes on to explain what I raised in the presentation with regards to use of the words and use of the language. I strongly depended on Barry Chevans, who did tremendous work. So my conclusion, which will be helpful in some regard, is that the Maccabee Bible is actually a fictitious name for either one of the books of the Lawrence or the collection of the Lawrence. And hence, if that were the case, the Maccabee Bible was banned in the 70s. But it had nothing to do with the books of the Maccabees and nothing to do with the Bible. That's my conclusion for those who read chapter 3. So my argument is this thing called the Maccabee Bible doesn't have a definition. It doesn't have, and in the 70s, when people were passing around, according to studies done by those who were studying the Lawrence, I'll remember her name in a few minutes, she said these books were being passed along by many of the people sitting in another room, not here. And there was deep interest in these De Lawrence books. Erna Bradbaugh. Erna Bradbaugh's pointed me in the direction, and I then explored the titles that Erna Bradbaugh raised. Those titles were the banned books. I then tie back Max Romeo's only comments that he made. A, the Maccabees was banned. The De Lawrence were banned. B, the other books were ringing in his head that were banned. The 6th and 7th book of Moses. So my conclusion is that the Maccabee Bible is just a title use. And my basis for that is I do not. So the liberation theology argument, Dr. Thomas and myself knows why, because I wrote a paper for him dealing with the aspect of resistance as Maccabees. So Dr. Thomas can attest to that point, but I'm not a liberation theology. When I was to be doing liberation theology, I was over UWI doing sociology, abnormal psychology, and hence I turned out like this and not a liberation theologist. Much to Dr. Terry Lochin's sanguine. So Dr. Thomas, that's why I struggled so much in your course. I was trying to pick up very quickly. So my conclusion is the Maccabee Bible is actually a term that was created to pass around those books that were De Lawrence books. And the commenters making about the 6 and 7 books of Moses, that's exactly the title that Toots has on this song that Christians are singing morning, evening, noon, and night, that have the names of the books of the Bible, but they don't realize the title of song is talking about an Obia book. And he got away with it. The 6th and 7th book of Moses is banned, is a De Lawrence book. Okay. Okay. All right. So step back 2 steps. A book on the occult. Great. We're together. A book on the occult. And the only reason why I said that is in the context where even Chevans himself makes reference to the early Rastafarians, he mentions that Dunkley and had Maccabees and De Lawrence books in their initial startup of their organizations. And that's according to Chevans. He states that they possess Maccabees and De Lawrence. Later on, in the growth of Rastafarianism, there becomes this anti-occult sense, which again drifts back into the 70s, because again Rastafarians start to read these books on the occult and claim that they have hidden mysteries in them. That's what Forsyth claims. And the books he's attributing them to be are occult books. And that's a challenge. So I did do a little bit of reading in that year.
Any other questions from the audience?
She upon the science. All right. While Mrs. Baston is here, can I just make a quick comment? There's a book called Albertus Magnus. There's a reason for this, everybody. Please look it up if you wish. It's a book on the occult, and it's titled The Secrets and Magic of Albertus Magnus. Anybody have an idea of who Albertus Magnus is? It's Albert the Great. Albert the Great was one of our great Catholic scientists, but the book was not written by him, but the title is attributed to him.
Possibility of the old tradition coming from Africa with respect to the Maccabee Bible. I think that is a likely possibility, that maybe there was some association that, as Noel made mention of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Bible that it had in the Maccabees version, if that could have been passed on to the Africans, and then it became a part of the old tradition, and then in their conversation was mention of the fact that, oh, we are the Maccabees books, etc. And then it became a part of the folklore, and it will be something to explore later on.
If Deacon allows us to have a follow-up session next year, we will have a part 2, and the following year a part 3, and by then, if there is any funding for PhD, and if God wills it. So I'd like to take this time now to thank you all. First of all, thank Almighty God for bringing me to this point and this long, extremely extended journey in completing this thesis. I'd like to thank him first and foremost for putting people in my journey that have facilitated this process. So definitely St. Michael's and the team at St. Michael's where I started, and definitely the team, Dr. Thomas and UTC, have sent my regards. Thank you very much for accommodating me and always, always, always making me feel welcome and feel a part of the UTC family. So, may our boaty sit on two sides of the fence, can go over. I'd like to thank the Archbishop Carter Fellowship, 1999. Archbishop Richards was the one who, symbolically handed me over. Can you come forward for me, please, so I can symbolically? This is what the first picture looks like. So symbolically, I'll just hand over a copy to the fellowship and thank them. You can put it. You can put it back down. Archbishop, you can put it. No. That's for the picture. I'd like to thank, especially my editors and those who read and reviewed my paper. Donna, I'm going to single you out in public. Thank you very much. But there's a long list of persons who I kept going to and asking them to please reread. Miss Cook was another person. The Headleys reread my paper, and every time they sent it back to me, I wondered what I wrote initially, because the writing didn't look like anything I did. I wish to thank them. I wish to thank the librarians, my queen, Royal Althea Smith here, who loaned me books and loaned me books and loaned me books, etc. And our librarian, Gillian, over UTC, please tell him, Dr. Thomas, that I sincerely express my gratitude for the assistance they did. The librarians over at UWI, who came in at the last part and did the editing and review of all of the citations. I also wish to thank my family, of course, my very tiny, small family, my brother Chris, my mother and my father, and my Aunt Joy, who coincidentally worked with Bernard Jankee at some point at the Institute of Jamaica. She too did a lot of reading and assisting with the research. My supervisor, Dr. Perkins for chairing tonight and guiding me. The quality of the paper is reflective of how meticulous Dr. Perkins has been in this journey in ensuring that I've stayed on track and to be focused. Deacon Espute, his article really pushed me off, and there are a number of people who along the way assisted me in the various aspects that I've gone. I thank Deacon Thwaites, who on Boxing Day we had this conversation to say, could we do this presentation, and we hope the next series that continues in these monthly presentations will bring out and have online as many people as we did tonight. I thank all of the deacons who have come here to support me. They know they have a special place in my heart. And I'm done now. The deacons were the last on my list. So I thank you all for coming out. I thank those who are online. And I look forward to Father Mario, please, to come forward. Okay. So thank you all very much for being here. And please, I cannot forget Nicholas, Royal Tech Team, who is doing the streaming on YouTube. And we thank you tremendously, Nicholas and Mark and your team, for being here. Thank you very much.
I am asked to do a commercial on the next 3 talks in the series that we already have planned. The idea is that every last Thursday of the month, there will be a workshop, seminar, forum here on a topic. So the next one will be Dr. Rotimi Omosulu. He is a philosopher in the philosophy section over at Mona. His specialty is environmental ethics, and he will be giving a presentation on environmental ethics. The following, that is March. In April, it will be Jesuit Father, his name escapes me now, Ronnie. Father, no, Perkins, Ricardo Perkins, who will be giving he hasn't given me the topic yet, but look out for him. And then in May, it will be Father Peter Hunter, Dominican priest living down the road, who, none of them are women, no. Right. And so those are the 3 that are lined up. We're really going for staff. And so I invite you, and you will, the same way you heard about this, you're likely to hear about the next 3. Thank you very much.
Please stand. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Loving God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for every gift that you have given us this day. We thank you especially for the gift of knowledge that we have received in terms of your sacred scriptures. We pray, Lord, that after all of these discussion, one thing that we'll take away is that your word is a light unto our path. And so we may follow your word, that it may guide us. Bless this institution and continue to bless more persons to dig deep into the truth of the scriptures, that it may guide our lives. We ask you to bring us home safely to our different destinations. All of this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.